School bullies don't know the new transfer is a skilled fighter. What if I told you that the quietest person in the room could be hiding the most incredible secret? What if that shy kid sitting alone at lunch, the one everyone ignores or worse, picks on, was actually capable of something that would leave everyone speechless? Lincoln High School on a grey Monday morning. The autumn rain taps against tall windows as hundreds of teenagers flood through the main entrance, their voices echoing off polished floors and faded motivational posters. The camera would capture the familiar chaos, groups clustered by invisible social boundaries, the popular kids claiming their territory near the trophy cases, the athletes strutting in their Letterman jackets, and scattered throughout, the forgotten ones. Heads down, earbuds in, desperately trying to become invisible. But today is different. Today, someone new walks through those doors. Kai Nakamura moves like a shadow through the crowded hallway, his presence so understated that most students don't even notice him. At 16, he carries himself with an unusual stillness, as if he's learned to occupy the smallest possible space in the world. His black hair falls slightly over dark eyes that seem to take in everything while revealing nothing. The worn backpack on his shoulders looks like it's traveled thousands of miles, and his simple jeans and plain grey hoodie mark him immediately as someone who doesn't belong to any of Lincoln High's established tribes. The morning light, filtering through the school's windows, catches the slight bow of his head as he studies a crumpled schedule. Trying to navigate hallways that feel like a maze designed by someone who wanted to make outsiders feel lost. You can almost see the weight he carries, not just in his backpack, but in the careful way he moves, like someone who's learned that drawing attention can be dangerous. Maybe you remember being that new kid yourself. Maybe you remember the feeling of walking into a place where everyone else seemed to know exactly where they belonged, while you felt like you were wearing a sign that said, "It doesn't fit here." That's Kai right now, though there's something different about him, a quiet strength that most people miss because they're not really looking. In the distance, near the school's main staircase, trouble is already brewing. Zach Morrison leans against a locker with the casual arrogance of someone who's never had to question his place in the world. At 17, he's built like his father, broad shoulders, thick arms, and the kind of confidence that comes from growing up in a house where strength is measured by how hard you can hit. His father owns Morrison's MMA academy downtown, and Zach never lets anyone forget it. 3 other boys orbit around him like satellites: Tyler, Kevin, and Marcus, each one desperate to bask in reflected glory, each one willing to do whatever it takes to stay in Zach's good graces. "Fresh meat," Tyler whispers, nodding toward Kai as he passes by, still studying his schedule with the concentration of someone trying to solve a puzzle. Zach's eyes narrow as he sizes up the new student. There's something predatory in his gaze, the way a wolf might look at a sheep that's wandered too far from the flock. "Look at this guy," he says, loud enough for his friends to hear, but quiet enough to avoid teacher attention. Bet he's never been in a real fight in his life. What they don't see, what nobody sees, is the tiny scar above Kai's left eyebrow, barely visible under his hair. They don't notice the way his fingers unconsciously trace a small pendant hanging beneath his shirt. They can't possibly know that this quiet boy has spent the last 8 years in a place most of them have only seen in movies, a traditional dojo hidden in the mountains of Okinawa, where the sound of wooden practice swords cutting through air mingles with the whispered teachings of masters who understand that true strength has nothing to do with hurting others. The first period bell rings, and the hallway chaos begins to organize itself into the familiar pattern of students rushing to classes they'd rather not attend. Kai checks his schedule again. AP History with Mrs. Chen, room 204. He starts walking, unaware that 4 sets of eyes are following his every move, already planning something that will change everything. As he climbs the stairs, his footsteps are almost silent, a habit developed over years of training on tatami mats, where every movement was meant to flow like water. Behind him, Zach and his crew follow at a distance, whispering among themselves like vultures, circling wounded prey. But here's what's really happening, what the bullies don't understand yet. They're not looking at prey at all. They're looking at someone who has faced real loss, real pain, and come through it with a kind of quiet strength that can't be taught in any gym or learned from any YouTube video. They're looking at someone who knows the difference between fighting and violence, between strength and cruelty. The classroom door closes behind Kai as he takes a seat in the back corner, another habit formed by someone who's learned that corners are safer, that being able to see the whole room matters more than most people realize. Mrs. Chen begins talking about the causes of World War I, but Kai's mind drifts to another place, another time. 8 years ago, in a small apartment above a noodle shop in Sacramento, two brothers sat watching old kung fu movies while their parents worked double shifts to make ends meet. The older brother, Hiroshi, was everything Kai wasn't: outgoing, confident, fearless. He was 17 then, the same age Kai is now, and he'd just won the state championship in karate. Their parents' pride filled the tiny apartment like incense, and Kai remembered thinking that someday, maybe, he could make them that proud too. The memory shifts, becomes darker. A rainy night, blue and red lights flashing against wet pavement, and the sound of his mother crying in a way that seemed to break something fundamental in the world. Hiroshi had been walking home from practice when a drunk driver ran a red light. Just like that, the boy who could have been anything was gone. That's when everything changed. That's when their parents, drowning in grief and unable to look at Kai without seeing his brother's face, made the hardest decision of their lives. They sent him to live with his great-uncle in Okinawa, a man none of them had seen in 20 years, a master of an ancient fighting art who lived like a hermit in the mountains. Kai blinks, returning to the present, as Mrs. Chen writes something on the whiteboard. Around him, students take notes or pretend to take notes while secretly texting under their desks. Normal teenage concerns, weekend plans, relationship drama, college applications, things that feel impossibly distant to someone who spent his formative years learning that every breath is a gift, every moment of peace, something to be treasured. The period ends, and as students file out, chattering about lunch plans and homework they've forgotten to do, Kai remains seated for a moment longer. He touches the pendant beneath his shirt, a small piece of carved wood that his great-uncle gave him on his last day in Okinawa. "Remember," the old man had said, his weathered hands gentle as he placed it around Kai's neck. "Strength without compassion is just violence. Compassion without strength is just weakness. True power comes from understanding both." Standing up slowly, Kai shoulders his backpack and prepares to face whatever comes next. He doesn't know yet that Zach Morrison is waiting in the hallway, along with 3 friends and a smartphone ready to record whatever humiliation they're planning. He doesn't know that within the next few minutes, his carefully constructed invisibility is about to shatter like glass. What he does know, deep in his bones, is that some battles are inevitable. And sometimes the person who looks like they can't fight is exactly the person you should never underestimate. The hallway is crowded again as students change classes, and Kai moves through the chaos like a stone through water, present but somehow untouched by the currents around him. But today, unlike every other day since he arrived at Lincoln High, someone is about to make sure he can't stay invisible any longer. Have you ever noticed how the universe seems to conspire sometimes? How moments that will change everything often begin with something completely ordinary? That's what's happening right now, as Kai Nakamura walks down a high school hallway, completely unaware that his quiet new life is about to collide with forces that will reveal exactly who he really is. Have you ever felt that moment when you realize there's no going back? When the careful balance you've built in your life suddenly tilts and you're forced to choose between who you've been pretending to be and who you really are. That moment is about to arrive for Kai Nakamura, and it's going to happen in the most humiliating way possible. The second period bell has just rung, and Kai is making his way to his locker when he feels it, that prickle on the back of your neck that tells you you're being watched. He's developed this sixth sense over the years, a survival instinct honed by too many nights, sleeping in unfamiliar places, too many days learning to read the intentions of others before they could hurt him. Zach Morrison and his crew have been following him for the better part of 20 minutes, staying just far enough back to avoid drawing teacher attention, but close enough to make their presence felt. They've been waiting for the perfect moment, and as Kai approaches his locker in a relatively empty section of the hallway, they know they've found it. "Hey, new kid." Zach's voice cuts through the ambient noise of slamming lockers and distant conversations. There's a specific tone that bullies use. Loud enough to draw an audience, but casual enough to seem accidental if an adult asks questions later. It's a tone that immediately makes everyone within earshot either look away or pull out their phones, depending on their moral compass. Kai turns slowly, his dark eyes meeting Zach's for the first time. Up close, the difference between them is stark. Zach stands nearly 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad from years of weight training at his father's gym. His 3 friends spread out slightly, creating a semicircle that blocks Kai's escape routes, a practiced formation that speaks to how many times they've done this before. Kai, by contrast, looks almost fragile. At 5'7" and lean, he appears younger than his 16 years. His simple clothes and quiet demeanor make him seem like exactly what these boys expect. Easy prey. "I'm talking to you," Zach says, stepping closer. The hallway seems to hold its breath as a few students slow their pace, sensing drama. Some have already pulled out phones because in today's world, every conflict is potential social media content. "Can I help you?" Kai's voice is steady but quiet, carrying just the faintest trace of an accent that speaks to time spent somewhere far from suburban America. He doesn't step back as Zach approaches, but there's no aggression in his posture either, just a careful stillness that most people would mistake for fear. "Yeah, you can help me understand something." Zach grins, the expression predatory. "See? I've been watching you walk around here like you own the place, and I'm trying to figure out what makes you so special." It's a classic bully opening. Take something innocent, simply existing in a space, and twist it into an offense that requires correction. Kai has seen this script before, played out in different languages, different countries, different contexts. The details change, but the underlying dynamic remains the same. Someone strong picking on someone they perceive as weak, performing dominance for an audience. "I'm not trying to be special," Kai replies, his tone still calm. "I'm just trying to get to class." "Just trying to get to class," Tyler mimics, exaggerating Kai's slight accent. "Did you guys hear that? He's just trying to get to class." The other boys laugh, the sound harsh and mechanical. This is when something shifts in Kai's expression. Not anger exactly, but a kind of profound sadness. You see, they don't know that they're mocking the accent he developed while living with a man who taught him that words, like techniques, should be used with precision and respect. They don't know that the careful way he speaks comes from years of learning that language is a bridge between hearts, not a weapon to hurt others. "Where are you from anyway, kid?" Marcus asks, stepping closer. "You talk funny." "California, originally," Kai answers truthfully, "but I lived in Japan for a while." "Japan?" Zach's eyebrows raise mockingly. "Let me guess, you learned karate, right? You gonna chop board with your bare hands?" He demonstrates with exaggerated arm movements that bear no resemblance to any actual martial art, and his friends laugh dutifully. Here's what's truly heartbreaking about this moment. Kai could end this confrontation in seconds. The training he received from his great-uncle wasn't just physical, it was psychological, spiritual, designed to create warriors who understood that the strongest person in any room is often the one who chooses not to fight. But that same training makes him acutely aware of what violence actually costs, what it takes from both the person who inflicts it and the person who receives it. So instead of demonstrating what 8 years of intensive martial arts training can do, Kai simply says, "I just want to go to math class." This response, so reasonable, so non-threatening, only seems to irritate Zack more. Bullies feed on reaction, on fear or anger or desperation. Kai's calm is like water on their fire, and it makes them want to pour gasoline on it instead. "Math class can wait," Zack says, reaching out to put his hand on Kai's shoulder. "We're having a conversation here." The moment Zack's hand makes contact, something interesting happens. Kai doesn't flinch or pull away, but every muscle in his body seems to come alive, like a guitar string that's just been plucked. It's subtle enough that the bullies don't notice, but anyone with training would recognize it immediately. The body preparing itself for action while the mind hopes it won't be necessary. "Please don't touch me," Kai says quietly, his voice still level but carrying a new quality, like the sound of steel being slowly drawn from a sheath. Zack's grip tightens instead of releasing. "Or what? You gonna cry? You gonna run home to mommy?" And there it is, the moment when everything changes, not because of what Zack said, but because of what he doesn't know he just said. You see, Kai can't run home to his mother. His parents, still drowning in their own grief, send him monthly letters filled with apologies and love they can't quite express in person. Home is a memory now, a series of photographs tucked inside his backpack next to textbooks and pencils. For the first time since this confrontation began, something flickers across Kai's face. A shadow of the pain he carries, quickly suppressed, but visible for just a moment to anyone paying attention. Unfortunately, the only people paying attention are filming this with their phones, waiting for the new kid to break down, or fight back, or do something worth sharing on their social media. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Kai says, and his voice remains steady, but there's something new in his eyes now. Not fear, but the kind of alertness that comes from recognizing that a situation is about to spiral beyond control. Too late for that. Zack grins, and he pushes, not hard enough to send Kai sprawling, but hard enough to make him take a step back, hard enough to establish dominance in front of the growing crowd of onlookers. Kai absorbs the push with the fluid grace of someone who's learned to work with force instead of against it, but he doesn't retaliate. Instead, he looks around at the faces surrounding them, some eager for entertainment, some uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene, some already uploading videos to TikTok with captions like, "New kid about to get wrecked." This is the moment when Kai makes a choice that will define everything that comes next. He could walk away, push through the crowd and disappear into the maze of hallways, accept the humiliation and hope it doesn't get worse. He could fight back, demonstrate just a fraction of what he's capable of, and end this before it escalates further. Instead, he chooses a third option, one that requires perhaps the most courage of all. He stays. "I understand you're trying to figure out where I fit here," Kai says, his voice carrying clearly enough for everyone to hear. "But pushing me around isn't going to give you that answer." The hallway falls silent, except for the sound of phones recording and the distant hum of air conditioning. Even Zack seems momentarily thrown by this response. It's not fear, it's not aggression, it's something else entirely. It's someone refusing to play the game by the established rules. "What did you just say to me?" Zack's voice rises, and now there's real anger there, the kind that comes from having your authority questioned in front of an audience. And that's when Kai makes his second crucial decision. Instead of backing down or escalating, he does something that nobody expects. He bows slightly, the gesture brief and respectful, the way his great-uncle taught him to acknowledge an opponent before a sparring match. "I said I don't want to fight you," Kai repeats clearly, "but if you need me to, I will." The words hang in the air like a challenge and a promise combined. The crowd pressed around them seems to lean in collectively, sensing that they're about to witness something significant. Phones continue recording, capturing every word, every expression, every breath of this moment that will soon be shared across every social media platform Lincoln High students use. Zack's face flushes red, Whether from embarrassment or rage or both, his friends looked to him expectantly, waiting for him to reassert dominance, to put this quiet new kid back in his place. The entire social order of Lincoln High seems to be balanced on the edge of what happens next. But what none of them realize is that they've just pushed someone who has spent years learning that true strength isn't about proving you're tough. It's about choosing when and how to use the power you've been given. And Kai Nakamura, quiet and unassuming as he appears, is about to give them a lesson in what that kind of strength actually looks like. The question isn't whether Kai can handle himself in a fight. The question is whether Lincoln High is ready for what happens when someone who's trained to be a weapon chooses to become a shield instead. Have you ever watched a dam about to break? How the pressure builds behind the concrete wall, invisible but inexorable, until that final moment when everything gives way at once. That's what the next few days at Lincoln High feel like. A steady accumulation of tension that everyone can sense, but nobody knows how to stop. After that first confrontation in the hallway, word spreads through the school like wildfire. The videos captured on dozens of phones make their way onto every social media platform, analyzed and dissected by students who love drama almost as much as they fear becoming its next target. But here's the thing about viral moments in high school. They rarely tell the whole story. What the videos show is Zach Morrison, the school's established alpha, backing down from a fight with some quiet new kid who barely comes up to his shoulder. What they don't show is the look in Kai's eyes during that moment. Not triumph or relief, but something much more complex. Something that looks almost like regret. By Wednesday, the dynamic has shifted completely. Kai walks through hallways that feel different now, charged with whispered conversations that stop when he passes. Some students look at him with newfound respect, others with suspicion, and still others with the kind of curiosity that feels invasive and uncomfortable. The invisibility he'd worked so hard to maintain has been shattered, replaced by a spotlight he never wanted. But Zach Morrison isn't the type to let a public humiliation go unanswered. The retaliation starts small. A shoulder check in the hallway that's just aggressive enough to be intentional, but subtle enough to avoid teacher attention. Kai's textbooks scattered across the floor outside chemistry class, their pages fluttering like wounded birds, while students step around them without helping. His locker mysteriously jammed with something sticky that makes it impossible to open without a maintenance worker's assistance. Each incident is carefully calculated, designed to be just ambiguous enough that when teachers ask questions, witnesses shrug and claim they didn't see anything. It's psychological warfare disguised as teenage pranks, and it's brutally effective. Kai endures it all with the same quiet patience he's shown since arriving at Lincoln High. But those who know how to look, and there are a few, mostly other students who've been targets themselves, can see the toll it's taking. The careful way he checks corners before turning them, the way his shoulders never fully relax, even when he's sitting alone at lunch. The way his fingers sometimes drift unconsciously to that pendant beneath his shirt, as if drawing strength from whatever it represents. On Thursday morning, things escalate. Kai arrives at his first period class to find his desk covered in soy sauce packets that have been carefully punctured, creating a sticky, salty mess that ruins his notebook and makes the entire corner of the room smell like cheap Chinese takeout. The message is unmistakable, a cruel reference to his time in Japan, his accent, his otherness in a place that values conformity above almost everything else. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly English teacher, notices the mess, but simply sighs and asks Kai to clean it up before class begins. There's no investigation, no questions about how it happened or who might be responsible. Just the assumption that somehow this is his problem to solve. As Kai uses paper towels to clean soy sauce from his backpack and textbooks, trying to salvage what he can while his classmates filter in for first period, something fundamental shifts inside him. Not anger. He was taught long ago that anger makes you sloppy, clouds your judgment, turns you into exactly the kind of person you should never become, but something else, something that might be harder to contain: disappointment. You see, Kai came to Lincoln High hoping for something different. After years of isolation in his great-uncle's mountain dojo, surrounded by ancient traditions and timeless wisdom, he'd imagined that returning to American high school life might offer him a chance to be normal, to make friends his own age, to worry about homework and weekend plans instead of meditation and combat techniques. He'd imagined wrong. During lunch that day, sitting alone at his usual table in the corner of the cafeteria, Kai watches the social ecosystem of Lincoln High play out around him. The popular kids holding court at their central tables, their laughter carrying across the room like they own not just the space, but the air itself. The athletes comparing weekend conquests and upcoming games. The theater kids rehearsing scenes from whatever production they're working on. The academic achievers hunched over textbooks, eating while studying. All of these groups have found their place, their identity, their sense of belonging. And then there's Kai, existing in the margins, belonging nowhere, and apparently threatening to everyone. That's when Tyler approaches his table, carrying a full tray of food, and wearing the kind of smile that immediately puts every nerve in Kai's body on high alert. "Mind if I sit?" Tyler asks, but he's already sliding into the seat across from Kai before getting an answer. His friends Kevin and Marcus follow, forming a triangle around Kai's corner table that effectively traps him in place. "We need to talk," Tyler continues, his voice friendly but his eyes cold. "See, you've got some people around here pretty confused about who you think you are." Kai sets down his sandwich carefully, his movements deliberate and controlled. "I'm not thinking I'm anyone special," he replies quietly. "I'm just trying to eat lunch. Just trying to eat lunch." Marcus repeats, mimicking Kai's accent again. "Just trying to go to class. Just trying to exist without bothering anybody. That's your whole thing, right?" There's something particularly cruel about this approach, taking Kai's reasonable, peaceful responses and twisting them into character flaws, making his desire to avoid conflict seem like cowardice, his politeness seem like weakness. "The thing is," Kevin chimes in, unwrapping his own sandwich with exaggerated casualness, "Zach's been pretty patient with you. More patient than most people would be, considering how you embarrassed him in front of the whole school." "I didn't mean to embarrass anyone," Kai says, and he means it. That moment in the hallway wasn't about humiliation or power plays for him. It was simply about drawing a boundary and hoping it would be respected. "But you did." Tyler leans forward, his voice dropping to a more intimate register that somehow feels more threatening than shouting would be. "And now everybody's looking at Zach like maybe he's not as tough as they thought. Like maybe some skinny kid from Japan can make him back down." The way they say Japan makes it sound like an insult, like there's something inherently wrong with having lived anywhere else, learned anything different, experienced a culture that values honor and restraint over dominance and aggression. Kai's fingers find his pendant again, that small piece of carved wood that connects him to teachings that feel increasingly distant in this fluorescent-lit cafeteria full of teenagers who think strength means making others feel small. "So here's what's going to happen," Tyler continues, his friendly mask slipping slightly to reveal something uglier underneath. "You're going to apologize to Zach. Publicly, in front of everyone who saw that video. You're going to admit that you were disrespectful, and you're going to promise it won't happen again." "And if I don't?" Kai asks, though something in his tone suggests he already knows the answer. Kevin and Marcus exchange a look that's full of anticipation, like they're hoping Kai will refuse just so they can demonstrate the consequences. "If you don't," Tyler says, leaning back in his chair with the satisfaction of someone who believes he holds all the cards, "things are going to get a lot worse for you around here. We've been gentle so far, a little mess in your locker, some homework accidentally knocked over, but we can make your life absolutely miserable if we want to." The threat hangs in the air between them, and Kai realizes that this moment is a test, not just of his willingness to be humiliated, but of his fundamental character. They want to know if they can break him, if underneath his unusual calm there's the same fear that makes most of their victims comply. Around them, the cafeteria continues its normal rhythm. Students laugh and argue and flirt and gossip, completely unaware that in their corner table, someone is being systematically torn down by peers who've turned cruelty into an art form. "I need to think about it," Kai says finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Think fast," Marcus warns, standing up and gathering his tray, because Zach's patience isn't unlimited, and neither is ours. As the three boys walk away, their mission accomplished, Kai sits alone with his half-eaten sandwich and the growing realization that his attempts at peaceful coexistence have failed completely. The careful balance he's tried to maintain, being strong enough to defend himself but gentle enough to avoid hurting others, isn't sustainable in an environment where kindness is seen as weakness and restraint is mistaken for fear. That afternoon, in the gym locker room after PE class, things finally come to a head. Kai is changing clothes when he notices that his regular clothes are missing from his locker. In their place is a note written in Zach's distinctive handwriting: "Roof, after school. Come alone, or everyone sees what a coward you really are." Standing there in his PE uniform, surrounded by the metallic clang of locker doors and the echo of teenage voices bouncing off tile walls, Kai finally understands that his great-uncle's teachings about avoiding unnecessary conflict have met their limit. Some battles, no matter how much you want to avoid them, eventually become inevitable. He touches his pendant one more time, remembering the old man's weathered hands and patient voice. "There will come a time," his great-uncle had said during one of their final training sessions, "when you must choose between being kind and being honest. When being kind enables cruelty, honesty becomes the greater kindness." Kai has spent days, weeks, trying to be kind, absorbing humiliation, ignoring provocation, turning the other cheek in hopes that peace might be possible. But his kindness has only enabled more cruelty, and now other students are watching to see if bullying works, if targeting the different and vulnerable is a successful strategy. Sometimes, the most peaceful person in the room has to fight, not for themselves, but for everyone else who might become the next target if they don't. As the final bell rings and students flood out of Lincoln High's front doors, chattering about weekend plans and homework assignments, Kai Nakamura walks quietly toward the stairwell that leads to the roof. In his backpack, carefully folded, are the clothes that Zach stole from his locker, returned by a freshman who found them stuffed in a trash can and recognized them as belonging to that quiet Asian kid. The freshman had looked scared when he handed them over, like he was afraid of getting involved, but couldn't bring himself to walk away. "Be careful," he'd whispered before hurrying off to catch his bus. "They're not going to fight fair." Fair. As if any of this has been fair from the beginning. Kai climbs the stairs slowly, each step deliberate and measured. His body feels different now. Not tense with anxiety, but alert with purpose. The careful stillness he's maintained for weeks is giving way to something else, something that feels like coming home to a part of himself he's kept carefully hidden. On the roof, 4 figures wait for him against the backdrop of a grey October sky. Zach stands in the center, flanked by his usual crew, and for the first time since this whole thing began, Kai sees him clearly. Not as an unstoppable force or an inevitable source of suffering, but as what he really is, a 17-year-old boy, so insecure about his own strength that he needs to prove it by hurting people who can't fight back, or at least people he thinks can't fight back. "Glad you could make it," Zach calls out, as Kai emerges onto the roof. "I was starting to think you really were a coward." The wind up here is stronger than in the protected hallways below, and it carries the sounds of normal life. Cars passing on distant streets, the shouts of students at sports practice, the hum of a city going about its business. Life continuing normally while something extraordinary is about to happen. Kai sets his backpack down carefully and faces the four boys who have made his life miserable for weeks. The late afternoon sun breaks through the clouds just enough to cast long shadows across the rooftop. And in that golden light, something in Kai's posture changes. He's still the same quiet, unassuming teenager who walked through Lincoln High's front doors weeks ago. But now, for the first time since arriving, he's also something else. Someone who has decided that sometimes the only way to end a fight is to show people what fighting actually looks like. "I don't want to hurt you," Kai says, his voice carrying clearly across the rooftop. It's not a threat or a boast. It's a simple statement of fact, delivered with the kind of certainty that makes everyone present suddenly realize they might have made a terrible mistake. But it's too late for second thoughts now. The stage is set, the audience assembled, and Kai Nakamura is about to remind everyone why his great-uncle spent 8 years teaching him that the most dangerous person in any room is often the one who desperately hopes they'll never have to prove it. What happens next unfolds in a way that will be replayed on social media thousands of times, analyzed and debated and mythologized until the truth becomes something larger than the actual events. But here's what really happened, moment by moment, breath by breath, in those crucial seconds that changed everything at Lincoln High. Zach moves first, exactly as Kai expected he would. Bullies are predictable. They rely on intimidation and overwhelming force, assuming their targets will crumble under pressure. His approach is everything Kai's great-uncle taught him to expect from an untrained fighter. Too much aggression, too little control, telegraphing his intentions like someone shouting in a library. The punch comes in wild and overextended, aimed at Kai's face with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. In the split second before impact, time seems to slow, and Kai can almost hear his great-uncle's voice echoing across the years. A true warrior moves like water, flowing around obstacles, finding the path of least resistance, turning an opponent's strength against them. What everyone watching sees next defies everything they thought they knew about physics, about power, about what's possible when someone truly understands the mechanics of human movement. Kai doesn't block the punch. He disappears from its path entirely, shifting his weight with such fluid precision that Zach's fist cuts through empty air where his head was a microsecond before. The movement is so subtle, so economical, that from a distance it looks like Zach simply missed. But those watching closely see something else, a kind of spatial awareness that seems almost supernatural. Before Zach can recover his balance, Kai's hand finds his wrist with surgical precision, not grabbing, not wrestling, just a gentle guidance that redirects all of Zach's forward momentum. It's like watching someone redirect a river, effortless, inevitable, beautiful in its simplicity. Zach stumbles forward, confused by the sudden absence of resistance where he expected solid contact. His body, committed to the attack, follows his redirected momentum until he's off balance and vulnerable. That's when Kai does something that stops everyone's breath. He helps Zach regain his footing. A gentle touch on the shoulder, a subtle shift of weight that prevents a humiliating fall. For a moment, the two boys stand face to face, and everyone watching realizes they've just witnessed something unprecedented. Not just a defensive technique, but an act of mercy that somehow feels more powerful than any blow could have been. "I don't want to hurt you," Kai repeats, his voice carrying the same calm certainty as before. But now everyone can see what those words really mean. This isn't a scared kid trying to avoid a beating. This is someone with the skill to end this confrontation in seconds, choosing not to. Tyler and Kevin exchange uncertain glances. This isn't how these things are supposed to go. Victims fight back desperately or collapse in defeat. They don't move like dancers and show mercy to their attackers. Zach's face flushes red, whether from embarrassment or rage or the growing realization that he's made a catastrophic miscalculation. "What the hell was that?" he snarls, swinging again, this time with less precision and more desperation. Again, Kai flows around the attack like smoke, his movements so minimal they seem effortless. This time, instead of simply avoiding the punch, he guides Zack's arm in a different direction. Not painful, not violent, just a gentle redirection that sends the bigger boy spinning in a slow circle until he's facing away from Kai entirely. "Stop," Kai says quietly, and something in his tone makes everyone freeze. It's not anger or threat, it's the sound of someone who has reached the limit of their patience and is offering one final opportunity for reason to prevail. But Marcus, perhaps thinking this is his moment to prove himself, charges from the side with all the tactical sophistication of an angry bull. He's bigger than Kai, heavier, driven by the kind of mindless aggression that believes momentum equals victory. What happens next is where Kai's training truly reveals itself. Marcus's charge meets not resistance, but redirection. Kai steps aside at the last possible moment, his hand finding Marcus's belt as he passes. Using the larger boy's own momentum, Kai executes a throw that would make his great-uncle proud, not violent or punishing, but so perfectly timed and positioned that Marcus seems to flip himself through the air before landing hard on his back. The wind knocked out of him, but otherwise unharmed. The silence that follows is profound. Even the wind seems to have stopped, as if nature itself is holding its breath. Kevin, who had been moving to flank Kai from the other side, stops mid-step, his face suddenly pale as he processes what he's just witnessed. Tyler, caught between loyalty to his friends and a growing sense of self-preservation, takes an unconscious step backward. But it's Zack's reaction that matters most. The humiliation in his eyes has been replaced by something else. Not just fear, but the dawning realization that he's been attacking someone who could have seriously hurt him at any moment, but chose not to. "How?" Tyler whispers, the question escaping before he can stop it. "How did you—" "8 years, Kai answers simply, helping Marcus sit up and checking to make sure he's not injured. 8 years in Okinawa, learning from my great-uncle, learning that strength isn't about hurting people, it's about protecting them." The words hang in the air like a revelation, recontextualizing everything that's happened over the past weeks. All those moments when Kai seemed weak, passive, afraid to fight back, he wasn't weak at all. He was showing restraint that none of them were capable of understanding. "You could have—" Zack starts, then stops, unable to finish the sentence. "Yes," Kai says, and there's infinite sadness in that single word. "I could have. From the very first day, in the hallway, when you put your hand on my shoulder. I could have ended all of this before it started, but I hoped I wouldn't have to." The truth of this statement settles over the rooftop like a heavy blanket. Every cruel prank, every humiliation, every moment of psychological warfare. Kai had endured it all while possessing the ability to stop it instantly. He had chosen to suffer rather than cause suffering. Zack looks around at his friends, seeing them clearly perhaps for the first time. Marcus still sitting on the ground, winded but unharmed. Kevin and Tyler backing away, their earlier bravado evaporated. All of them suddenly aware that they've been picking on someone who could have hospitalized them without breaking a sweat. "Why didn't you?" Zack asks, his voice smaller now, stripped of its earlier aggression. "Why didn't you just show us what you could do from the beginning?" Kai's hand goes to his pendant again, that small piece of carved wood that connects him to lessons learned in a place where strength and wisdom were inseparable. "My great-uncle taught me that using your skills to hurt people when you could avoid it makes you no different from anyone else who uses power to harm the innocent," he explains, his accent more noticeable now as emotion creeps into his voice. He said that a warrior's first responsibility is to protect peace, not disturb it. The late afternoon sun is setting now, casting long shadows across the rooftop and painting everything in shades of gold and amber. In this light, Kai looks different somehow, not just like a high school student anymore, but like someone carrying traditions and responsibilities that stretch back generations. But what about when peace isn't possible? Kevin asks, surprising everyone, including himself, with the philosophical nature of the question. Then you do what you must, Kai replies. But you do it with regret, not joy. You do it to protect others, not to prove yourself, and you do it with the minimum force necessary to restore peace. He gestures to Marcus, who is now sitting up normally, completely uninjured, despite having been thrown through the air moments before. I could have landed him on his head, damaged his spine, broken bones. Instead, I made sure he landed safely. That's what my training is really about. Controlling outcomes, minimizing harm, even to people who want to hurt you. This concept, using devastating skill with surgical precision and infinite mercy, is so foreign to these boys who have grown up in a world where strength means domination, where conflict resolution comes through overwhelming force or complete surrender. They're witnessing something that challenges their fundamental understanding of what power means. So what happens now? Tyler asks, and everyone can hear the genuine uncertainty in his voice. The old dynamic has been completely shattered. They can't go back to bullying someone they now know could destroy them, but they also don't know how to move forward. Kai looks at each of them in turn, his dark eyes reflecting something that might be hope. Now we start over, he says simply. Now we try to build something better than what we had before. Now we see if we can turn enemies into friends, cruelty into kindness, fear into understanding. He picks up his backpack and shoulders it, the movement casual but somehow ceremonial, like someone completing a ritual that has transformed not just himself, but everyone present. The choice is yours, Kai continues, his voice carrying across the rooftop with quiet authority. You can keep being the people you were, people who use strength to make others feel weak, who find joy in causing pain, who mistake cruelty for power, or you can become something better. You can become the kind of people who protect others instead of hurting them. As he walks toward the rooftop door, leaving the four boys to contemplate this impossible choice, Kai pauses and looks back one more time. My great-uncle used to say that the strongest person in any room is the one who has the power to hurt others, but chooses not to. Today, I had to show you that I have that power. Tomorrow, I hope we can all choose not to use whatever power we have to cause harm. The door closes behind him with a soft click, leaving Zach, Tyler, Kevin, and Marcus alone on the rooftop as the sun sets over Lincoln High. In the distance, they can hear the normal sounds of life continuing, traffic, sirens, the laughter of children playing in a nearby park. But up here, in this space that will forever be marked by what just happened, four teenagers sit in silence, forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that they've been using their strength for destruction when they could have used it for protection, causing pain when they could have created peace. And somewhere in the school below them, walking quietly through empty hallways toward the front entrance, Kai Nakamura finally allows himself to feel the weight of what he's just done. Not pride, his great-uncle's teachings run too deep for that, but relief. Relief that he found a way to end the cruelty without becoming cruel himself, to show strength without causing true harm, to defend himself while still protecting his attackers from the worst consequences of their own actions. The quiet new kid who just wanted to attend math class and eat lunch in peace has just proven that sometimes the most powerful response to violence is perfect, controlled, merciful strength. And everyone who witnesses what happened on that rooftop will spend the rest of their lives remembering the day they learned the difference between being tough and being strong. But here's the thing about moments that change everything. They ripple outward in ways you never expect, touching lives and transforming perspectives far beyond the original participants. What happened on Lincoln High's rooftop that October afternoon was just the beginning. Within hours, the video footage captured by hidden phones begins spreading across every social media platform. But unlike the typical viral fight videos that glorify violence and humiliation, This one tells a different story entirely. Students who weren't even there become fascinated by the mystery of Kai Nakamura, the quiet transfer student who moved like water and fought like poetry. The comment sections explode with theories and speculation. Did you see how he helped the guy up after redirecting his punch? He could have seriously hurt them, but chose not to. That throw was straight out of a movie, but he made sure the guy landed safely. Who is this kid? But it's not just the physical techniques that capture people's attention. It's the restraint, the mercy, the way Kai transformed what should have been a brutal confrontation into something that looked almost like a dance. High school students, accustomed to seeing strength displayed through dominance and cruelty, struggle to understand what they're witnessing. Maya Rodriguez, a junior who's been quietly watching Kai since he arrived, finally works up the courage to approach him Monday morning. She finds him at his locker, moving with the same careful stillness he's always shown, as if the weekend's events haven't changed anything fundamental about who he is. "That was incredible," she says softly, her voice barely audible above the morning hallway chaos. "What you did on Friday. I've never seen anything like it." Kai looks at her for a moment, seeing someone who understands the difference between power used to harm and power used to protect. Maya has been bullied herself, not by Zach's crew, but by others who found her quietness and intelligence threatening. She recognizes a kindred spirit. "I didn't want to hurt them," Kai replies, his voice carrying that same note of sadness it held on the rooftop. "I just wanted them to understand that there are other ways to be strong." "Did they?" Maya asks. "Understand, I mean?" Before Kai can answer, they're interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Both students tense, expecting another confrontation, but what they see instead stops them both cold. Zach Morrison walks toward them slowly, his usual entourage notably absent. His face carries none of its typical arrogance. Instead, there's something that might be humility, or at least the beginning of it. His friends trail behind at a distance, uncertain and clearly uncomfortable with this new dynamic. "Kai," Zach says, stopping a respectful distance away. "Can we talk?" The hallway seems to hold its breath. Other students slow their pace, sensing drama but not understanding its nature. This isn't the usual predator-prey dynamic they're accustomed to seeing. This is something entirely different. "Of course," Kai replies, closing his locker and giving Zach his full attention with the same calm presence he's always shown. "I owe you an apology," Zach begins, the words clearly difficult for someone who's never had to admit wrongdoing before. "Not just for Friday, but for everything. The way we treated you, the things we did, none of it was okay." Maya finds herself holding her breath, watching this unprecedented scene unfold. Around them, other students begin to gather, drawn by the impossibility of what they're witnessing. Zach Morrison, Lincoln High's alpha predator, publicly apologizing to his former victim. "I spent the whole weekend thinking about what you said," Zach continues, his voice growing stronger as he finds his footing, "about choosing who we want to be, about using strength to protect instead of hurt. And I realized that everything I thought I knew about being strong was wrong." He glances around at the growing crowd, then back at Kai with something that might be respect. "My dad always taught me that if you're not the strongest person in the room, someone else will use their strength against you. So I made sure I was always the strongest, always the one in control. But watching you on Friday, the way you had all the power but chose not to use it to hurt us, I finally understood what real strength looks like." The confession hangs in the air like something fragile and precious. Students who have spent years watching Zach dominate through intimidation and fear struggle to process this new version of him, vulnerable, reflective, seeking forgiveness from someone he spent weeks tormenting. "You don't need to apologize to me," Kai says gently. "But you might want to think about all the other students you've treated the same way over the years. They deserve to know that you understand what you did was wrong." The suggestion lands like a physical blow. Zach's face pales as he contemplates the full scope of his actions. Not just the weeks of targeting Kai, but years of similar behavior toward anyone he perceived as weak or different. The weight of accumulated cruelty becomes visible in his expression. "I don't know if they'll forgive me," he admits, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe they will, maybe they won't," Kai replies with characteristic honesty. "But the only way to find out is to try. The only way to become better is to start being better." That afternoon, something unprecedented happens in Lincoln High's cafeteria. Marcus Williams, the freshman who returned Kai's stolen clothes, sits alone at his usual corner table when Zach Morrison approaches carrying a lunch tray. The boy looks up in terror, expecting the worst, but instead of intimidation, he receives something he never thought possible. "Mind if I sit?" Zach asks, echoing the words Tyler used days earlier, but with completely different intent. "I wanted to apologize for the way my friends and I have treated you this year." The conversation that follows is halting, awkward, but genuine. Zach, struggling with unfamiliar emotions and unlearned patterns of behavior, tries to make amends for months of casual cruelty. Marcus, cautious but desperate for any sign that his daily torment might end, cautiously accepts the apology. Other students notice. Word spreads. Within days, an impossible trend begins, bullies approaching their former victims with apologies, attempting to repair damage they never thought about until now. Not all of these conversations go well. Some victims are too hurt, too angry, too scarred to accept words without actions to back them up. But enough do that the entire social ecosystem of Lincoln High begins to shift. The transformation isn't universal or immediate. Change never is. But something fundamental has been altered in the school's culture, like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that spread outward in ever-widening circles. Dr. Patricia Wells, Lincoln High's principal, finds herself dealing with an unprecedented situation. Instead of the usual stream of bullying reports, she's receiving requests from students who want to start clubs focused on conflict resolution, peer mentoring, and martial arts training. The school's disciplinary problems don't disappear overnight, but they begin to shift in character. Less predatory, more accidental, more resolvable through conversation rather than punishment. During a faculty meeting, she shares something that surprises even the most experienced teachers. In 30 years of education, Dr. Wells says, looking around the conference room at colleagues who've seen everything, "I've never witnessed anything like this. One student's example has done more to change our school culture than every anti-bullying program we've ever implemented combined." Mrs. Chen, Kai's history teacher, nods thoughtfully. "It's because he didn't just talk about being better. He showed them what better looks like. These kids have never seen someone use power responsibly before." The conversation turns to Kai's unusual background, the martial arts training that shaped not just his physical abilities, but his entire approach to conflict. Someone suggests inviting him to speak to other classes, to share the philosophy behind his actions. When Dr. Wells approaches Kai with the request, she's surprised by his response. "I'm honored," he says, his voice carrying that same quiet certainty that has come to define him. "But I don't think words alone will help. If you really want to change things, we need to give students tools, not just for defending themselves, but for understanding when not to fight is actually the stronger choice." That's how Lincoln High's first ever mindful martial arts program begins. Meeting after school in the gymnasium, Kai teaches interested students basic techniques focused not on aggression, but on awareness, balance, and de-escalation. The classes fill up within days, drawing participants from every social group in the school. Zach is among the first to sign up, approaching the program with the same intensity he once brought to intimidation. But under Kai's patient guidance, he begins learning that true martial arts isn't about proving superiority. It's about finding harmony with yourself and with others. The strongest technique, Kai explains during one session, demonstrating a simple redirecting movement, is the one that ends a conflict without anyone getting hurt. The greatest victory is the fight you never have to fight. Tyler, Kevin, and Marcus, Zach's former crew, also join the program, each drawn by different motivations, but all seeking something they couldn't find in their previous patterns of behavior. Tyler, it turns out, has been dealing with anger issues stemming from his parents' divorce. Kevin reveals struggles with self-esteem that he tried to address by putting others down. Marcus admits that he went along with the bullying because he was terrified of becoming a target himself. Under Kai's guidance, they begin learning not just physical techniques, but emotional regulation, conflict resolution, and the ancient art of turning opponents into allies. The program becomes a laboratory for transformation, proving that even the most entrenched patterns of behavior can change when people are given better alternatives. But perhaps the most profound change occurs in Kai himself. For months, he's carried the weight of isolation, of being perpetually misunderstood, of having to hide fundamental aspects of who he is in order to fit into an environment that had no framework for understanding him. Now, surrounded by students eager to learn not just his techniques, but his philosophy, he begins to find something he'd almost given up hope of discovering: belonging. One evening, after practice, as students file out of the gymnasium still energized from training, Maya approaches Kai with a question that's been bothering her for weeks. "Don't you ever get angry?" she asks. "After everything they put you through, all the humiliation and cruelty, don't you want revenge?" Kai considers the question seriously, his fingers finding that familiar pendant beneath his shirt. "My great-uncle used to say that anger is like holding a hot coal," he replies thoughtfully. "You can throw it at someone else, but you're the one who gets burned first. Revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it doesn't actually solve anything. It just creates more anger, more pain, more reasons for the cycle to continue." He gestures toward the gymnasium, where Zach and his former crew are putting away equipment, working together instead of competing for dominance. But transformation, helping people become better versions of themselves, that creates something lasting, that breaks cycles instead of perpetuating them. Maya nods, beginning to understand why Kai's approach has been so effective. In a world full of people trying to prove their strength through domination, he chose to demonstrate it through elevation, lifting others up instead of tearing them down. The ripple effects continue spreading beyond Lincoln High's walls. Parents notice changes in their children's behavior, report fewer conflicts at home, observe increased confidence and emotional maturity. Local news outlets pick up the story of the Mindful Martial Arts program, curious about this unusual approach to addressing bullying and violence in schools. But for Kai, the true measure of success isn't media attention or administrative approval. It's the small moments that reveal genuine transformation. Zach helping a younger student pick up dropped books instead of knocking them down. Tyler using breathing techniques to manage his anger instead of lashing out at classmates. Kevin choosing to build others up instead of tear them down to feel better about himself. One afternoon, as Kai sits in his usual corner of the cafeteria, he's surprised to find his table slowly filling up. Maya sits down first, followed by other students from the martial arts program. Then, to his amazement, Zach approaches with his lunch tray. "Mind if we join you?" Zach asks, the same question that once carried threat, now carrying hope. Looking around at faces that weeks ago showed him only hostility and contempt, now reflecting genuine friendship and respect, Kai finally understands what his great-uncle meant when he said that a warrior's greatest victory isn't defeating enemies, it's turning them into allies. "I'd like that," Kai says. And for the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, he truly means it. The corner table that once represented isolation and targeting becomes something else entirely, a gathering place for students who've learned that strength isn't about dominating others, but about helping them become stronger themselves. And at the center of it all sits Kai Nakamura, No longer the quiet outsider desperately trying to become invisible, but someone who has found his place by helping others find theirs. Sometimes the most powerful transformation isn't the dramatic moment when everything changes. It's the quiet accumulation of small kindnesses, daily choices to be better, and the gradual recognition that the strength to change the world begins with the courage to change yourself. But what if I told you that Kai's story, this incredible journey from victim to victor to healer, is happening in schools across the world right now? What if the quiet kid sitting alone in your cafeteria, the transfer student everyone ignores, the person you walk past without a second thought, has within them the power to transform everything? 6 months after that pivotal afternoon on Lincoln High's rooftop, the school barely resembles the place Kai first entered. The transformation isn't cosmetic. The same lockers line the same hallways, the same fluorescent lights buzz overhead. The same announcements echo through identical speakers. But something fundamental in the atmosphere has shifted, like the difference between a house that's simply occupied and one that's truly become a home. The Mindful Martial Arts program now has a waiting list. Students who once defined themselves through opposition, jocks versus nerds, popular kids versus outcasts, bullies versus victims, find themselves training together, learning together, growing together. The artificial boundaries that once seemed so important begin to dissolve when people discover they share common ground in their desire to become better than they were. Dr. Wells stands in her office window, watching students interact in the courtyard below during lunch period. Where she once saw rigid social hierarchies and careful territorial boundaries, she now observes something that would have seemed impossible just months ago: genuine integration. Students from different backgrounds and social groups sit together, laugh together, support each other through the normal dramas and crises of teenage life. It's remarkable, she tells the district superintendent during his quarterly visit. Our disciplinary incidents are down 60%. Our academic performance is up across all demographics. But more than that, you can feel the difference the moment you walk through our doors. The superintendent, a veteran educator who's seen countless programs and initiatives come and go, nods thoughtfully. What do you attribute the change to? Dr. Wells considers the question carefully. How do you explain that one student's example of authentic strength has rippled outward to touch hundreds of lives? How do you quantify the impact of someone who chose mercy over vengeance, elevation over dominance, transformation over destruction? We had a student who showed us all what courage actually looks like, she says finally. Not the courage to fight, but the courage to choose peace, even when peace seems impossible. The courage to help your enemies become your friends. The courage to be strong enough to lift others up instead of tear them down. In the courtyard below, Kai sits surrounded by friends who were once strangers, allies who were once enemies. The quiet transfer student who arrived carrying ancient wisdom in a modern world has found his place not by changing who he is, but by showing others who they could become. Zach Morrison approaches the group carrying a college recruitment letter. Several schools have noticed his transformation from troublemaker to leader, from bully to mentor. But instead of the arrogant celebration his old self might have displayed, he shares the news quietly, gratefully, acknowledging how different his life might have been if not for the patient guidance of someone he once tried to destroy. I still can't believe how close I came to throwing everything away, he admits, looking at Kai with genuine remorse. If you hadn't shown me there was another way to be strong, you found that strength yourself, Kai replies with characteristic humility. I just helped you see it was already there. This exchange, witnessed by dozens of students who once lived in fear of Zach's aggression, serves as a daily reminder that transformation is possible for anyone willing to do the difficult work of becoming better than they were. The boy who once used his strength to intimidate and control now uses it to protect and encourage, becoming exactly the kind of leader the school needed. Tyler, Kevin, and Marcus have each found their own paths forward. Tyler channels his intensity into academic achievement and helps other students struggling with anger management. Kevin discovers a talent for mediation, helping resolve conflicts before they escalate to violence. Marcus, the most reluctant participant in the original bullying, becomes one of the program's most effective teachers, his own experience as both perpetrator and victim giving him unique insight into the psychology of school violence. But perhaps the most significant transformation belongs to the broader student body, kids who were never directly involved in bullying or being bullied, but who witnessed it and did nothing. They've learned that silence in the face of cruelty makes you complicit in that cruelty, and that sometimes the most powerful intervention is simply standing up and saying, "This isn't okay." Maya Rodriguez, who first approached Kai after the rooftop incident, now co-leads the martial arts program and has become a bridge between different social groups. Her quiet observation skills and genuine empathy make her particularly effective at identifying students who might be struggling with bullying, isolation, or other challenges. The thing about Kai's approach, she explains to a group of middle school students visiting for a presentation, is that it doesn't just stop bad things from happening, it helps good things start happening instead. Instead of just ending fights, it creates friendships. Instead of just stopping bullies, it helps them become protectors. The ripple effects extend far beyond Lincoln High's walls. Other schools in the district have requested presentations about the Lincoln model, curious about how one institution achieved such dramatic cultural change. Kai finds himself traveling to conferences and workshops, sharing not specific techniques, but the underlying philosophy that made those techniques effective. Violence is easy, he tells a room full of educators and administrators. Anyone can learn to hurt others, but it takes real skill, physical, emotional, and spiritual, to resolve conflicts without causing harm. It takes genuine strength to choose healing over hurting. His great-uncle, now in his 80s and still living in the mountains of Okinawa, receives regular letters describing these developments. The old master's responses are brief but profound, filled with pride, not for his students' fighting ability, but for his wisdom in knowing when not to fight. "You have learned the most important lesson," one letter reads. "A warrior's greatest victory is not defeating 1,000 enemies, but helping one enemy become a friend. Continue walking this path, and you will find that strength and compassion are not opposites, but partners in the dance of life." On the anniversary of that rooftop confrontation, Kai stands in the same spot where everything changed. The late afternoon sun creates the same golden light, the same long shadows, but the energy is completely different. Instead of tension and violence, there's peace and reflection. He's not alone this time. Students from the martial arts program have joined him for what's become an annual tradition. A moment of meditation and gratitude, remembering not just the conflict that changed everything, but the choice that followed it. The choice to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than hurt, to transform rather than merely punish. Looking out over the school grounds where hundreds of students are finishing their day, some heading to sports practice, others to academic clubs, many to the martial arts program that has become the heart of Lincoln High's transformation, Kai finally understands something his great-uncle tried to teach him years ago. True strength isn't about what you can do to others. It's about what you can inspire others to do for themselves and each other. The quiet transfer student who just wanted to attend math class and eat lunch in peace has become something he never expected. Not a warrior in the traditional sense, but something far more powerful, a catalyst for transformation, a living example that even in the darkest circumstances, there's always a choice to be better than what the world expects from you. As the sun sets over Lincoln High, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, Kai touches the pendant beneath his shirt one more time. But now it feels different, not like a connection to something distant and lost, but like a bridge between past wisdom and future possibility. Because here's what Kai's story really teaches us, that the most powerful weapon against cruelty isn't more cruelty, but kindness wielded with the precision of a master. That the strongest response to hatred isn't more hatred, but love, backed by the courage to act. That sometimes the person who looks weakest is actually the strongest, and the person who seems most alone has the power to unite everyone around them. And that transformation, real, lasting, meaningful change, doesn't come from forcing people to be different. It comes from showing them who they could become and then giving them the tools and support they need to become it. So I ask you, who are you choosing to be today? When you see someone being treated badly, do you walk away or do you step forward? When you have the power to hurt someone who's hurt you, do you use that power for revenge or for healing? Because somewhere in your school, your workplace, your community, there's someone who needs what Kai offered, not rescue, but recognition. Not someone to fight their battles for them, but someone to show them they have the strength to fight those battles themselves. Someone to prove that kindness isn't weakness, that mercy isn't surrender, that choosing peace doesn't mean accepting defeat. Maybe that person is sitting alone right now, convinced that the cruelty they're experiencing is just the way the world works, that there's no alternative to either being a victim or becoming a victimizer. Maybe they're carrying pain they think no one understands, feeling invisible in a world that seems designed to make them feel small. Or maybe that person is the one causing the pain, trapped in patterns of behavior they don't know how to break, using aggression and dominance because those are the only tools they've ever been given, desperately needing someone to show them that there's another way to be strong. The truth is, we all have the potential to be Kai Nakamura. Not the martial arts skills, though those are impressive, but the choice to respond to cruelty with wisdom, to meet hatred with understanding, to transform enemies into allies through the simple but profound act of refusing to become what they expect us to become. Every day, you encounter moments where you can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. When you see someone being excluded, you can walk past or you can include them. When someone treats you badly, you can respond with equal cruelty or you can show them what better looks like. When you have the power to hurt someone, you can use that power destructively or constructively. These moments matter more than you think. Because just like Kai's example rippled outward from one rooftop confrontation to transform an entire school, your choices, however small they seem, create ripples too. The kindness you show to someone who doesn't expect it might be exactly what they need to stop the cycle of hurt in their own life. The mercy you demonstrate might teach someone else that strength and compassion aren't opposites but partners. The courage you show in standing up for what's right might inspire others to find their own courage. Think about the last time someone surprised you with unexpected kindness. Remember how it felt, how it changed your day, maybe even changed your perspective on people in general. You have the power to create that feeling for someone else. You have the opportunity to be the reason someone believes in goodness again, trusts in the possibility of change, finds hope when everything seems hopeless. But here's the most important part of Kai's story, the part that transforms it from an inspiring tale into a call to action. He wasn't special because of what he could do. He was special because of what he chose to do. The martial arts training was impressive, but the real power came from his decision to use that training in service of peace rather than dominance, healing rather than harm, transformation rather than destruction. You don't need 8 years of training in a mountain dojo to make those same choices. You don't need to be able to redirect punches or execute perfect throws to redirect anger into understanding, to help someone who's fallen get back on their feet, to transform a moment of potential violence into an opportunity for growth. What you need is the courage to believe that people can change, that kindness is stronger than cruelty, that choosing the harder path, the path of patience and mercy and hope, is always worth it, even when the results aren't immediately visible. Because here's what Kai understood that took his great-uncle 8 years to teach him. The strongest person in any room isn't the one who can hurt the most people. It's the one who can help the most people become better than they thought possible. So as this story ends, I want you to ask yourself, what would happen if you carried yourself like Kai? Not with martial arts skills, but with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have the power to make things better instead of worse. What would happen if you approached every conflict as an opportunity for understanding rather than victory? What would happen if you used your strength, whatever form it takes, to lift others up instead of tear them down? What would happen if you became the person who shows others that there's always another choice, always another way, always hope for something better? The answer is simple. You'd change the world, one person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of unexpected mercy at a time, because that's what real warriors do. They don't conquer enemies, they create allies. They don't destroy obstacles. They transform them into opportunities. They don't prove their strength by making others feel weak. They demonstrate it by helping others discover their own power. The quiet kid in your class, the person eating lunch alone, the colleague everyone ignores, the neighbor who seems different. Any one of them could be carrying within them the seeds of transformation, waiting for someone to see their potential instead of their problems, their strength instead of their struggles, their capacity to become something beautiful instead of just their current pain. And you could be that someone. You could be the person who changes everything for them just by choosing to see them differently, treat them better, believe in them when they can't believe in themselves. The choice is yours. The power is in your hands. The moment is now. What are you going to do with it? If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about strength and kindness, about power and responsibility, about the choice between tearing down and building up, then share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear that change is possible, that kindness isn't weakness, that being different doesn't mean being alone. Share it with someone who has the power to hurt others, but needs to understand there's a better way to be strong. Share it with someone who's been hurt and needs to know that pain doesn't have to be permanent, that enemies can become friends, that the story isn't over yet. Because in a world that often feels divided by anger and fear and the desperate desire to prove who's stronger, stories like Kai's remind us of something crucial. We're all stronger together than we are apart. We're all capable of more kindness than we think. We're all one choice away from becoming the hero in someone else's story. So be that hero. Be the person who chooses mercy over vengeance, understanding over judgment, hope over cynicism. Be the one who proves that strength and compassion aren't opposites, but partners in the most important work any of us will ever do. The work of helping each other become the best versions of ourselves. Because that's the real lesson of Lincoln High, the true wisdom of Kai Nakamura, the lasting legacy of a quiet transfer student who changed everything by choosing to be exactly who the world needed him to be.